Greetings, everybody. Today is lesson 33, and I want to change up our format a little bit and share my reflections first and some lines that really resonate with me and how I've applied them in my world. And then at the end, I will go through and read the entire lesson. So if you have some time, stick with me to the end. And sometimes when you hear the whole lesson kind of read through, it works on us on a different level. So even though you might not understand it, I know there are some lines still to this day that really kind of like don't make any sense, but it's in the continual reading and study of the course that the material begins to really take root and settle into our realities. But for lesson 33, there's a line here that really is powerful, and it's the line itself, it's the mantra, and it says there is another way of looking at the world. And this is so powerful because I remember in 2020 when, gosh, so many of us went through, so many of us, all of us have gone through a lot since 2020. There was so much that came to light for a lot of us for the first time. I know for myself, it was a really heavy time, a confusing time, and I think that really is across the board for a lot of us. But what I remember about myself during the whole 2020 era was that I was living in Mexico and I wasn't sure why everybody was so mad and justified. People that I looked up to, teachers that I looked up to that were really speaking negatively about political leaders. There was this kind of normalized meanness that settled in. And given I was living in Mexico and life was pretty grand, I mean, every day I was at the beach, I was doing my work online, my kids were little, we were drinking juice every day. I mean, life was just really, it was one of my favorite times in my life. I spoke out a lot about it on my social channels and in my It's Yoga community that the teachings of the course are consistent. They are not to be used sometimes when it suits us and to be kind of disregarded in times when we feel anger and frustration and desire to hang on to that. The course is applicable to every situation, to anything, to every relationship. So if there's another way of looking at the world, then there just is. And I remember saying that online a lot, that forgiveness is a practice that everybody needs to learn because essentially that is the goal of all spiritual practice is forgiveness. God doesn't need forgiveness. We need forgiveness because we're the ones judging. But we perceive God, the divine, as judgmental. And so that produces a lot of fear for us. And there are only two emotions the course is teaching us. There's only love and there's only fear. So if I'm online talking shit about so and so politician, whether that's true or not, I'm talking shit. And I'm the one who's feeling that vibration. And that is the vibration of fear. Now, there was a lot of talk in that time also about justified anger, righteous anger. And given there's been some space, I really disagree. All anger is anger. Mild anger is the same as full-on rage. Full-on rage is the same as a little annoyance. It's either love or fear. So in this lesson, what the course is teaching us is that there is another way of looking at the world. And it's in looking at it in another way than the one that we perceive that we gain all of the things that we truly desire: happiness, joy, freedom, peacefulness, etc. So it's important for us to remember the times in life and that we felt um, cheated or betrayed or disappointed in something that's happening on the outside. And 2020 was the time for that. I mean, that was just like the theme. So if there's another way of looking at the world, and I am willing to subscribe to that, there's a lot of peace there. And that's what I was saying back in 2020, and that's what I'm still saying right now. There's another way of looking at this world that we live in. So many times we are so invested in our version of it. And it just is this way. You need to do this so you can get that. That person is wrong because of this. Those very structured attachments cause suffering. And the goal of the course, what the course says is the goal, God's goal for us is perfect happiness. So the way to attain perfect happiness is the willingness to see the world differently and to raise your hand at times when you're like, hey guys, um, I think that's a lot of anger. Maybe you should look at that. Maybe that's not because of the world outside you. Now, that happens. We look at the world outside us and there is anger and there is frustration and all of the things. But it's when we become invested in those that they seem to take over and they become righteous anger and they become justified. So, my message for you today in lesson 33 is that the world that you see outside you is a reflection of the world you see inside. So work on the world inside. Does it mean you're still not going to see all the other things? True, you'll see them differently. You'll see maybe their function, their purpose. You'll see the collective consciousness. And you will decide to remove yourself from this righteous anger, from the way that you see the world that causes the suffering that you're seeing, and make a shift. And remind yourself, there is another way of seeing the world. So if you have another minute, I'm going to read through here and just let the words move through you. They're so beautiful. There is another way of looking at the world. Today's idea is an attempt to recognize that you can shift your perception of the world in both its outer and inner aspects. A full 5 minutes should be devoted to the morning and evening applications. In these practice periods, the ideas should be repeated as often as you find comfortable, though unhurried applications are essential. Alternate between surveying your outer and inner perceptions, but without an abrupt sense of shifting. Merely glance casually around the world you perceive as outside yourself. Then close your eyes and survey your inner thoughts with equal casualness. Try to remain equally uninvolved in both and to maintain this detachment as you repeat the idea throughout the day. The shorter exercise periods should be as frequent as possible. Specific applications of today's idea should also be made immediately when any situation arises which tempts you to become disturbed. For these applications, say, there is another way of looking at this. Remember to apply today's idea the instant you are aware of distress. It may be necessary to take a minute or so to sit quietly and repeat the idea to yourself several times. Closing your eyes will probably be helpful in this form of application. So, just to wrap this up, when you do feel distress, when you feel anger, when you feel frustration, you say to yourself, there is another way of looking at this. There is another way of looking at this. And when you do that, you will see another way. It's very important to be careful with our ego because our ego is our own intelligence used against us. It's like that righteous anger I was speaking to earlier. You feel correct in that, but that is only the ego confirming that you should be unhappy and in judgment of the world you see. Where from the metaphysical perspective, it is in observation. It's in pulling out, in surveying your inner world and your outer world and allowing it to be what it is. So much of this anger and this speaking out is like yelling at a movie, or I was just watching a show with my kids the other day. It's like reading a newspaper and yelling at the newspaper. This husband is doing that, and the wife says, yelling at the newspaper again, honey? Let me know when it talks back. about. It's like you've got to realize you're the one yelling at a paper. You're the one yelling at the TV screen. There is another way of looking at this. See you next time. Happy practicing, friends.